All right. A very good evening to all the participants. Welcome to lecture number 41 of the NetSet Mentoring Series organized by Department of English and CLS in collaboration with its Alumni Association. Dear friends, this week the lectures shall be focused on literary criticism and theory. So today, for lecture number 41 on archetypal criticism, we have with us Ms. Hena Muliana. Ms. Hena Muliana is an assistant professor at the Department of English and CLS, Saurashtra University, Rajkot. She has cleared her GSET, Gujarat State Eligibility Test, and she is currently pursuing her doctoral research from the Department of English, Saurashtra University. Ma'am, welcome to the session, and I hand over the session to you.
Thank you, Parth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello.
Yes,
Am
ma'am,
I
you are
audible?
audible. Hello.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, you are
Okay.
audible.
I will be switching off my video for the better result of the lecture.
Sure.
Okay. So today I shall be speaking on archetypal criticism, which is also known as myth criticism in literary criticism. First of all, uh, we shall go to the very word archetypes. Now, archetypes is a symbol or an image that recurs often in a work of literature, right? Which means, in the words of Carl Jung, he calls it primordial images. So, according to Carl Jung, the certain experiences of human beings are rooted in the psyche of human beings from the time immemorial, and hence they are the part and parcel of their perception. So it can be an image, an archetype can be an image or a symbol or a situation, or in literature it can be a character also, right? So that is a pattern which is a copy of the images or the symbols that already exist in the psyche or the subconscious of human beings. The propounders of this theory are Carl Jung is the first who has given the concept of the collective unconscious. Then you have James J. Fraser, and after that you have Northrop Frye, who then picked up this theory of Carl Jung and James J. Fraser and took it ahead as the archetypal criticism. Right. Now, Jung was a Swiss psychologist who came up with this term, archetype. And he proposed that archetypes are repeated throughout generation in humankind. And that is why he calls it collective unconscious. Unconscious, which is, you can also call it subconscious, which is the, part of your psyche. It resides in your unconscious mind. There are desires, there are, the images and myths that human being carries in their mind, no matter from which culture they belong to. So that is why Carl Jung calls it collective unconscious. And when he came up with this theory, he used to analyze the images and symbols of his patients' dreams. And as we know, uh, Sigmund Freud is also his disciple, and he has written the famous text that is the interpretation of dreams, where Freud also uh, studies the dreams of his patients, and he comes up with certain images which are recurrent in patients' mind. The second, James Fraser, he was a Scottish social anthropologist, and he studied different religious concepts and applied them to religion, applied them to literature as well. So this criticism, archetypal criticism, has its roots in psychology, or you can say psychoanalysis. in social anthropology. The third, which is quite famous, who is Northrop Frye, he was a Canadian literary critic and literary theorist, and he focused on the structures of different genres of literature. And he tried to relate these structures with different genres of literature, and he also related it with different seasons, right? So what actually do archetypal critics do when they took up this theory, and they try to apply it to literature? What exactly do they do? Archetypal critics would suggest that all human experience is linked through literature, and that this experience is again and again using the same patterns throughout time and space. Which means, when can you call something an archetype? When that image is recurring through time immemorial, constantly in works of literature. For instance, if we take an example of binary relation, in our society, no matter which society, which culture we belong to, there are binaries. And the famous and significant binary that comes to my mind is the binary of light and dark, or the binary of man and woman, or the binary of truth and false. So this concept that something is in this binary is dominant, and something in the binary that is non-dominant, that is man and woman, or light and dark. Light is always thought upon as a positive force, and dark is always thought upon as a negative force in life as well as in literature, right? So this concept that light is always about positivity and dark is always about negativity, that thought itself has resided in our psyche for a long time, that we don't even question that why in these two binary, why one is always dominant and the other is always non-dominant. So the reason is that has been rooted in our psyche since a long time, that we don't even try to question it, right? So when you apply archetypal criticism, while you study a text from the perspective of archetypal criticism, you find the images, the symbols, the situation that has recurred in literature through a long time, whether it is Western literature, whether it is Indian literature, whether it is American literature, any literature you pick up, any culture you pick up, this concept of right and wrong, light and dark, man and woman is same anywhere and in any literature. So one of the reason that archetypal criticism focuses on the primordial image or recurring images of literature is to find the deeper meaning in literature. And that deeper meaning leads to the collective human experience that has been experienced by human beings, no matter which culture or which literature they belong to. As we know that literature is a mirror to society and it reflects society in which it was produced. So if you take Milton's Paradise Lost, or if you take Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, there are certain characters that recur. There are certain elements. Let's say the element of an outcast. Heathcliff was an outcast. In Paradise Lost, Saturn was an outcast, or he was thrown out of heaven because he had defied God. So this concept of outcast recurs in literature, no matter which age it is written in, no matter by whom it is written, in which culture and circumstances the work of literature has been produced, it remains the same. So there are certain archetypes that remains same throughout the literature of the world. Secondly, An archetypal critic would also say that the recurring patterns in literature prove that there are universal truths, right? So again, the same thing, that the reason they study archetypes is this, that at the end of the day, no matter where where literature belongs to, it has the same universal truth, right? Now, if I come to the categories of archetypes, there are different categories of archetypes, and they can be divided into conflicts. There are archetypal conflicts, there are archetypal characters, there are archetypal situations, there are archetypal themes, there are archetypal myths, and there are archetypal symbols. Now, if you come to the conflicts, there are archetypal conflicts in any work of art that you pick up. They are likely to be there. The conflict of young versus old, the conflict between strong versus weak, there is a conflict between rich versus poor, there is a conflict insiders versus outsider, there is the conflict of dream and reality, there is conflict of man and woman. Whether you can call it conflict, or you can also call it binaries. So any work of literature that you pick, I just gave you example of Wuthering Heights. So if you have read the novel, you would know that the protagonist of Wuthering Heights is Heathcliff, and he was brought from the Liverpool railway station by Catherine's father, and he has been treated as an outsider, right? And there are insiders like Catherine, then her brother Hindley, and all the upper class family. So there is also the concept of discrimination that is there. Then the concept of the conflict between man and woman, that you would find everywhere in any literature that you pick up. And this binary that exists between man and woman, which is constant. If I give you the example of Margaret Atwood's The Edible Woman, there is this woman character called Marion, and through this novel, Margaret Atwood depicts the binary gender stereotypes as well as the binary between man and woman. That since a long time in our society, we are taught certain things, that when you say woman, there are certain attributes that women are given, that women are, supposed to be beautiful, that they're supposed to be nurturing, and they're supposed to be coy and innocent and gentle speaking, they cannot talk back, whereas men are supposed to be breadwinner of their home, they are supposed to be protective and assertive, they are not supposed to show emotions. So that is the notion about what man is, which has been implanted in our psyche so well that we find it natural that women are supposed to do this, men are supposed to do that. There is a criteria given, and if you don't work in that criteria, if you don't function in that criteria, you are considered unnatural or not usual, something different, something unusual, or something weird. So that conflict exists in society since a long time. I was talking about this novel, Margaret Atwood's novel, the Edible Woman. If I give you example, there is a place where Marion is working, and in that place, the upper stairs of the office are specifically allotted to men employees, whereas women are supposed to work downstairs. So that is one of the discrimination that you find in the novel. If I talk about rich and poor, now this is very common. Any novel you pick up, there are characters that are extremely rich, that are they belong to the aristocrat family. If I give you the example of Wuthering Heights, Catherine belongs to a well-to-do family, whereas Heathcliff is an outcast. He is poor. So one of the reason why he is being treated as an outcast is he is poor. He has no family. He's black, so that is the concept of racism also. Then, if you say the conflict between strong and weak in Wuthering Height, the character of Heathcliff, although he is an outcast, he is the strong character, right? Physically as well as mentally. Although by the end of the novel, his mental health also collapses and he dies. Whereas the weakness is shown by Catherine's husband, Linton. So he is, you know, depicted as a very weak character, although he is a man. So again, there is a contradiction between the two. So this conflict between characters you would find in any work of literature that you come across. Secondly, there are archetypal characters. So in archetypal characters, you have innocent youth, you have a bully who always uh, tortures and manipulates other characters. There is an innocent character always. Like if you take the example of Cinderella story, Cinderella is innocent, and his sisters are bully. His stepsisters, I would say. Then there is everyman. Everyman means a common man. There is a character of devil as well, and there is a character of dreamer as well. There is a character of scapegoat who often is suffering from someone else's bad doings. Then you have an outcast. I already gave you example of an outcast. Then if you would find the character of magicians mostly in Shakespeare's drama. Then there is the character of shrew, warriors in epics. In Shakespearean tragedies, you would find warriors, hero who are warriors. There are dragon slayers. So in fantasy literature, you have dragon slayers. Then hero is the soul of novel or any work of art, where we always look up to hero. And hero, why he is hero? Because he is he looks after his family. He wins the battle. So there are certain texts that we attach to hero's character. There are wanderers that you find in works of literature. The next archetypal uh, is archetypal situation. So if I give you example, coming of age. Now there are many novels that are coming of age novels, where you have uh, a growth of character from being a child to being an adult. So if I give you example of Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, there from the beginning of the novel you find Stephen Dedalus as a child, and as the novel the novel moves ahead, his character is not only developed mentally but physically as well as in all dimensions his character is being developed. And as his character develops, the language of the novel itself is developed. So how does this novel starts, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man? The novel starts like as any story would start. Once upon a time, a baby taku was coming down a road. That is how the novel starts. And how does novel end? Novel ends in a diary. So there is a diary entry of Stephen Dedalus where he decides that he wants to create literature. He wants to write about Irish culture and Irish religions, and he ends his novel. This novel is ending in a diary form, and the last entry of diary invokes Stephen's great grandfathers to to support him, to bless him for the work that he is He has decided to begin. So, in a way, if you see, the ending of the novel is not actually an ending, it is actually the beginning. So, in a way, the novel is an open ended novel, right? So, these are the coming of age novel where you see a character being developed through the course of novel. Then you have the archetypal situation like being tempted. So if I give you example of the tempted character, Macbeth, and the character of Macbeth in the play Macbeth, he is being tempted for the throne of Denmark by these three witches, because Macbeth begins by with the scene of these three witches where, you know, they say that when shall we meet again? And one of the witches says that when fair is foul and foul is fair, overthrow the fog and fill the air. And in that two lines itself, the entire drama can be summed up. Fair is foul and foul is fair. Right? What seems fair does not is not fair, but what seems foul is not actually foul. There are, contradictions. So Hamlet was being tempted by these three witches to kill the king Duncan. He was not actually tempted, but they prophesied that he will be the future king. And in order to make that prophecy true, he he believed that this prophecy is going to be true, and rather than letting fate take its turn, he and his wife decided that they will take fate in their hand, and they kill King Duncan, and we know that how then he faces his downfall. Then there are characters there are characters whom you would find sacrificing for the family. So these kind of archetypal situations are also found in works of literature. Then situations of falling from high position, or dying, or being reborn, loss of innocence, as you would find in Stephen Dedlas. That and this loss of innocence can be from various reasons. And one of the reason can be the exposure of hero to sexual sexual activities. Then the quest. Now, this identity quest is one of the recurrent theme that you would find in any literature, right? If you take the epic of Mahabharata, or the epic of Ramayana, or the Shakespearean tragedies, or any postmodern literature or modern literature. But the point is, this identity quest, that hero is searching for something, that that theme of quest of finding an identity is recurring in the works of literature of various culture and countries, right? The next archetype is archetypal myths, where you have myths of Adam and Eve, then you have myths of David and Goliath, then Garden of Eden. So in the works of literature, when there is the image of garden, it automatically reminds you of the Garden of Eden. When you see the conflict between man and woman, it somehow reminds you of Adam and Eve, the two binaries that they represent, right? So these are the archetypal myths that you would find. Next is the archetypal symbols. Now there are variety of symbols that you would find in poems, in novels, in drama. One of the symbols that is very common, that is recurring, is water. Now, water stands for creation, purification, redemption, fertility, growth. Then you have the symbol of garden, that is paradise, That is, the garden represents innocence. Garden also represents fertility. Then if you see the color of red, red stands for multiple symbols. That is, it stands for blood, it stands for sacrifice, it stands for patience, it stands for disorder. Sometimes red can also be the signification of danger. Then you have the color green, which symbolizes growth, fertility, and life in literature. Then a black color signifies chaos, death, and evil. Whereas if you see the symbol of fire, fire is often related to knowledge and life. And ice, the symbol of ice represents ignorance and death. Right. Then archetypes of literature. So these are the archetypes that we saw. There is archetypes of characters, there is archetypal conflicts, there are archetypes of situations, there are archetypal myths, there are archetypal symbols as well, which you would find reoccurring across different literatures, no matter where and in which language and culture they belong to. Right? Now, archetypes of literature. There are four types of literature or narrative patterns according to Northrop Frye, and he calls them mythos or unifying myth. And he has related them to the season of the year, from the story of the birth, death, and to the rebirth of the mythic hero. The mythos of summer represents romance. So the romance has the birth or youthful adventure of the mythic hero, which suggests innocence and triumph. So here in this type of literature, you have narrative of wish fulfillment with good character triumphing over bad, which is a very common thing, that we want our hero, our protagonist, triumphant, who defeats the villain. So these kind of narratives that you find with wish fulfillment or good characters triumphing over the bad one, they they are called romance. For example, you have Sir Gawain in the Green Knight, or the stories of Robin Hood and old fashioned cowboys. Then the mythos of autumn is analogous to tragedy, where you have major movements towards death or defeat of the hero. We know the definition of a tragic hero, that they have a tragic flow. They are having some of the best qualities as being a hero. They are warrior, they are good king, but they have one drawback that brings them down. So the stories of Oedipus and the King Lear and all the tragedies by Shakespeare has this this situation where the hero is moving towards death, or he is defeated because of his one drawback. Then there is the mythos of winter, which is analogous to irony and satire. Now, in this type of works, hero is not present, hero is absent, and society is left to fend for themselves. There is no leader, there is no sense of norms or values, and this represents the satirical or ironical situations of life. For example, if you take works of Kafka or Camus or Conrad's work Heart of Darkness, suggest hopelessness and bondage. If you see in modern literature, postmodern literature, sorry, there is this sense of hopelessness, there is this sense of bondage, and there is this sense of freeing themselves from this clutches of hopelessness. The reason is that postmodern literature had the Second World War at its backdrop, which has annihilated, destroyed the entire human race. So there was chaos and disorder not only outside but inside their mind. They they were they were disappointed. They had lost faith in human beings. They had lost faith in God. So that was the situation where there was no hero. If you take Waiting for Godot or other novels, and if you see the hero of the novel, they are different from the heroes that you find in Elizabethan age, in Victorian age. You know, the concept of hero itself is changing with the course of time. Here, for example, I just gave you example of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. There is another novel, Ulysses. The hero himself is lost. He himself is searching for his identity, his roots. So there is no point where he is going to lead it. So these kind of works, they represent irony and satire. The next is Mythos of Spring, where it represents or it is analogous with comedy, where you have rebirth of hero, where you know life is being renewed in a newer way. And here you would find hero and heroine take the rightful place, where order is restored, and all of this Shakespearean comedies are example of that. So with that, I shall end my lecture. This is all I had to say for today. If you have questions, then I'm open for it. Chirag Aditya says, I think it is
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hannah, for this enlightening lecture. Participants, the session is open for your query. You can unmute yourself and you can write your question query in chat box too.
I would like to answer to Chirag Aditya's question. My point was not the differentiation between what is Bildungsroman and coming of age. What I wanted to point out is the kind of situation that you find in works of literature which are recurrent, whether it is Bildungsroman or coming of age or Kunstroman, but the situation are similar. That is what I was pointing it. My concern was not, but although thank you for pointing it out, but my concern was the kind of situation that you find reoccurring in works of literature time and again.
Yes. Thank you so much, Hannah madam. Now, participants, if you have any other question, query, meanwhile, participants gather their strength and ask something. Yeah, there is one question from Radha Makadia.
Yes, we
Uh,
can call the character of Ulysses as an archetypal character because that he is in the search of identity, and that the very thing that is being represented, the journey itself is an archetype that you would find reoccurring in different works of literature across the globe. So yes, Ulysses' character is the situation, the journey that he has is an archetypal character. For example, in Macbeth, the sleepwalking scene of Lady Macbeth seems to have found its roots, has found its root from the Greek mythologies, as well as the appearance of ghost itself has its roots to Bible. So yes, you can call him an archetypal character. Can we call every literature?
there is another question from Rini Basumatre. Can we call every
Hmm.
literature as archetypal novel stories?
No, you need to find the recurrent images or characters or symbols from the novel. Some of it would not be archetypal, but the what is the meaning of archetype? That it should have reoccurred constantly through various works of literature. Then and only then you can call it an archetype. So you need to find, and that is the job of archetypal critic, that they find the images from a particular work of art, whether they find a situation, or whether they find the symbol, or whether they find the archetypal character, and then they need to identify with other works. Then you can call it whether it is archetype or not. So every literature cannot be called an archetype, but yes, there are certain situations, certain characters, certain images and symbols that you would find reoccurring. For example, these binaries of man and woman, light and dark, bad and good, they are recurrent, right? I hope I have answered your question, Rini.
Certainly. Participants, any other question if you have?
Can we consider the character arc?
Yeah.
In Albert Camus' work The Outsider or the Stranger, can we consider character archetype as a role in Albert Camus' work The Outsider or the Stranger? Now see, I have not read the work, but you need to study whether the character, what character is going through. If you have found the same recurring situation with other characters from the past or other works, then you can call it an archetypal character. So that itself is a study. If he is in the quest of identity or somewhat like that, then you can consider it an archetypal. So for that, you need to read it and study. And I myself have not read that work, so I cannot answer for that. But yes, there has to be certain recurring images, but that needs to be studied to call it an archetype.
Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. Participants, if you have any other question, you can ask. Yeah, meanwhile, as we have time, I would just ask you that if you can share your experience, your strategy for preparing NetSlet, then it would be helpful for the aspirants.
Okay. See, as far as the net set preparations are concerned, there is no strategy as such, but by by the time you have cracked the net or set, I think you come up with some strategy. So I would suggest that while preparing for net and set, not only the reading of history books would help. For that, you need to, while reading history books, you need to pay attention to what are the significant works in the history books, and you need to explore that. Maybe you can uh, read the entries of Google or Wikipedia. Besides, I would suggest that companion to English literature would do a great help if you are, very keen on it. Besides that, while preparing, see, there is only one way, which is you need to be consistent while you read. You cannot read for 1 month and then have a drop. Until and unless you don't get it, you need to be after it. And you need to have a proper schedule for that. Not a schedule as such, but every day at least 6 to 7 hours of reading would help to read. And as far as NAT and SAT is concerned, as I said, there is no way out except that you read, and read until you don't get it. And you need to internalize certain aspects of literature in order to crack it. Like some of the significant works, some of the significant writers, all the movements, all the ages of literature, you need to internalize. That should be on the tip of your tongue. Then and only then it will help you to clear it. Good book for literary theories. Okay. There is Literary Terms by Chris Baldick that I used to read. Yes, while preparing net for net and set, you can also read Glossary of Literary Terms, go through it twice at least. Then there is another book by Chris Baldick, Literary Terms by Chris Baldick. That is also helpful. And besides that, you have Companion to English Literature by Dina Birch and Katie Hooper. That companion has all the literary terms, all the works by all the writers. So that again would help you to crack it. So there is only one law for that. You read and read and read until you are, you know, done with it. You have cracked it. So that is all. If you have questions regarding archetypal criticism, uh, the last one that I mentioned, that is a Companion to English Literature by Dina Birch and Katie Hooper.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hannah Madam. Uh, Participants, if you still have any question, you can ask. We still have a time. Yeah, it seems that nobody has any question,
Yes.
and I feel that now we have to end the session. So, behalf of Team Indian Line, I'm grateful to you, Hannah Madam, for this enlightening session and let
Thank you.
everyone to know about archetypal and the literature of the archetypal. So, thank you so much, Hannah Madam, for your lecture. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you. Thank
participants,
you.
for joining us and asking us questions so that your other aspirants also come to know about the literature, the books for the preparation. Thank you so much, participants, and the speaker as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.